But then if they want to do questions, you'll just be monitoring from.
Yes, we're monitoring the chat. Yeah. So it is my pleasure then to introduce Chip Carter. He is the CEO / producer / host of Where the Food Comes From. And his presentation today is called Bye Bye Bananas, What's Next in Food and Farm Sustainability. I had the pleasure of meeting Chip at an event put on it was Fat Feed Farm. With Homegrown Hillsboro. We just kind of connected over the food sustainability piece. We've kind of connected and bringing him into the Patel College meeting TH today. So we are super excited to have him out. And I will let you take it from here.
Thank you. So, a couple of things you probably don't know about this banana. Some of you might know one of the things. I'll be shocked if anybody knows the other one except you, because I just told you. You already kind of know. So, number one, you've been opening it all wrong. You watch monkeys, they'll show you, start at what we would consider the bottom, peel it down this way, up with a nice little handle and none of those nasty strings. That's the way it's done in nature. That's the way, I don't know, I've kind of come to prefer it. Who can tell me something else about this banana?
Most of the nutrients are in the skin.
I'm not going to eat the skin though, so that's.
I
don't think that's proven. You're the scientist in the bunch. Why don't you tell us? Can you get high off a banana? Who can tell me anything about this banana?
Bananas originally had bigger seeds and then they were genetically modified so that they're such small seeds and they don't work.
And there are still many varieties of bananas that have those big old seeds. It wasn't genetic modification. It was traditional crossbreeding that gave us this variety, which is called the Cavendish.
It's not local.
Not
I
local,
assume they mean
No.
the bananas are not local.
not a local banana. I can take you where there are local bananas. And in fact, season 5 of our show is about to start. And we've got an episode where we're down in Southwest Florida. Let me finish my banana bite. Where we're actually going to look at local bananas and some other things. But what we have here in the US and the world is a problem with bananas right now. So that's the first thing you don't know is you're opening it wrong. The second thing you don't know is that in less than 10 years, there aren't going to be any more bananas. The banana will be extinct. More smoothies, no more banana splits. Already happening. Already happening. There's a disease called fusarium, which is a fungus. Last 20 years, it has been spreading like wildfire through all the banana production areas of the world. Why aren't you hearing about it? Why has no one talked? Did anybody know that? You did know that? You had heard that? Where did you hear it? How long have you known?
I'm from Colombia.
Oh, okay. So that would be a really good way you would know. We haven't heard about it because it hasn't impacted us yet. And the big banana producers are not exactly coming out and going, y'all might want to look for something else to have with your breakfast cereal. It's just not. And I think in a very large manner, information's available. We just kind of don't care. So what we're looking at then, and I'm going to explain to you what's wrong with the bananas and what the solution might be a little bit later on. Agriculture touches every second of every minute of every hour of every life. Unless you are hungry and naked, I don't see much of that back here. Somebody might be hungry, but nobody's naked. Agriculture is touching you right now. You cannot get away from it, cannot separate yourself from it. So we have to look at sustainability in agriculture. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is try to save some time for questions at the end, but I would really rather, if you have questions, ask them as we go, because I want to be talking about what you're interested in. I got a whole lot of stuff in here. I can go a whole lot of different directions. I'd rather talk about what you want to talk about than just what I want to talk about. Sustainability in agriculture. Sustainability has become a buzzword across every industry. I think the whole world is looking for the next sustainable thing, and it's a great thing. I hope it's not just a buzzword. I hope we're serious about it, and I hope we're going to make it just part of our way of life moving forward. But in agriculture, sustainability has always been part of the way of life. In fact, it's been around so long, farmers didn't ever used to even use the word sustainable. They used the word stewardship. That word has been around so long, it's actually biblical. And all it means is taking care of what you've been given. Farmers understand that they must be sustainable or they're out of business. So sustainability in agriculture really occurs at 5 key levels. The first thing you have to do is sustain the land to make sure, A, you have the land to produce, B, that the land is capable of producing food. The next thing you must make sure is sustainable are the practices. How are you farming that land? What are you doing? Are these practices that you can continue without exhausting the land, without creating problems, without creating more problems than you're trying to solve? The third thing that has to be sustainable in agriculture is the crop. The crop must remain viable. That's what's going on with the bananas. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. The next thing that has to be sustained is us. There has to be enough bounty and volume and abundance of food to keep us all alive so we can go about doing all the other important things that we do. So agriculture must sustain us, and last but certainly not least, agriculture must sustain the farmer. The farmer must be able to continue to grow and make a living, so they'll keep growing and feeding all of us. When JFK was president, 50% of Americans made their living from agriculture. Today, that's 1.5%. So take a room with 100 people, 1.5 of those people are feeding everybody else in that room. Is there a clock somewhere? Turn this on my phone real quick then. My dad was a small town preacher. So I can go on and on and on if I have to. We could be here all night. So sustainability is just not, it's not a buzzword in farming. It's just part of farming. It's just baked into it, because if you're not sustainable, you're out of business. The first area where things must be sustainable is land. When we say land, that means availability of land. Beyond any chemical inputs or any of the other things that are part of other areas of sustainability in agriculture, access to and availability of land is critical. What we see as we travel this country, we've made 65 half-hour TV shows about food and farming across the U.S. And we're still pumping them out as fast as we can. I am very happy to announce this is the first public announcement. We have been on a small network on cable and direct TV. We're on a couple of other channels. We're in some public school systems, but we've been working with the team from Google Food Labs for the last few weeks. We're now moving everything online to our own YouTube channel. We're going to stay where we are with the networks and TV and all that kind of stuff, but we want to get these shows, and they're strongly suggesting we get them out where everybody can see them. So as of today, for the first time, you go home, you can look up where the food comes from on YouTube and watch all of our shows. It's real simple, at where the food comes from. You also be able to find out what's wrong with all them bananas that I keep talking about. So to have access to land, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by that? Well, we've got this idea in our head that you can just take some seeds and plant them in almost any patch of dirt. We could walk out this door, go right out there, put some seeds in the ground and grow something. Maybe, maybe not. There are certain types of soil that are better for agricultural production than others. Beyond that, there are certain types of soil within those types that are better suited to growing certain crops. What we have seen in this country, I coached youth soccer for many, many years here in Tampa Bay. Back in the 90s, when I first started coaching, our soccer field was surrounded on 3 sides by orange groves. It was just absolutely beautiful. You stand out there on a Saturday morning smelling the orange blossoms and just thinking, wow, this is what it should be like. Very, very hard to find an orange grove in Hillsborough County now for a couple of reasons, but mainly because of development. I live in the New Tampa Wesley Chapel area. It's probably the fastest growing area in the United States. There used to be a lot of pastures. There used to be a lot of citrus groves. Now there's a lot of shopping malls and a lot of subdivisions and a lot of car dealerships. We understand you got to have growth and there's got to be economy, but there also has to be a preservation of agricultural land. That's something that we lost sight of in this country many, many years ago. People always thought, well, you can farm anywhere. You can farm anywhere, but we need a Walmart right here, right now. So now we're looking up and we're going, oh, you know what? Some of this other land is not really suitable for farming. And it's a little too late because we've already built all this other stuff on top of it. I'll give you a perfect example. Who knows what a Vidalia onion is? Vidalia onion. Nobody knows what a Vidalia.
Sweet, right?
Yeah. It's an onion that is so sweet. It's still spicy. It's still savory, but it's so sweet. You can peel it and eat it like an apple, and I do, and it's delicious. It's very, very popular with chefs. It's been a big deal probably in the culinary world since the 80s. But that onion, the Vidalia onion, number one, was an accident. It was never supposed to happen. That onion was never supposed to grow. Back in the 30s, there was a local farmer in Vidalia, Georgia. Vidalia, Georgia is a real place. It's not just the name of an onion. It's in deep southeast Georgia. There's only 20 counties and parts of 3 others where you can grow a Vidalia onion. You can plant this onion somewhere else, but it's going to come up hot. It's going to come up more like a normal onion. It's not going to have that eat it like an apple quality. That is what really makes a Vidalia onion special. So in the 30s, there's a farmer got a little bit late start. Onions are grown from slips, little plants, not from seed. What they do is they start the seed in a nursery. They grow the slips. The farmers set those slips out in the field. That's what becomes the onion plant. Well, this guy got off to a late start. Then there was a late frost. Wiped out his onion crop. He was frantic trying to find replacements for his slips that late in the season. All the local suppliers were out. All the seed suppliers were out. There were no more slips to be found. He finally found some in Texas, which you might be surprised to know that Texas grows onions. That's not really what we think, but you might also be surprised to find out an onion is a desert crop. It really prefers a hot, dry climate. In Texas, they grow an onion, and they have for many years, called the 1015. You're sitting there going, I don't know and I don't care. Actually, you do know and you might care. You ever go somewhere and get an awesome blossom or a colossal, the things that Outback has, num, 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 num. Those are Texas 1015 onions. They're still hot, they're still spicy, but they got just a little sweetness to them. So this farmer, Mose Coleman, found someone in Texas who had some 1015 slips he was willing to ship, loaded up a train car, shipped them to Vidalia, Georgia. Mose Coleman planted that crop, hoped for the best. When they came up, they were perfectly mild, perfectly sweet, and he thought he was ruined. He had a contract with the local Piggly Wiggly supermarket He took the onions to the market and he said, I don't know what happened. I am so sorry. So the manager tried one. He's like, well, let's put it out and see what happens. Overnight, an industry was born. Now, they didn't do a really good job marketing that onion because this was in the 30s. For the next 50 years, outside of Idalia, no one had heard of it. But people all across Georgia and the Southeast knew if somebody was passing through Idalia, Georgia in the springtime, they say, hey, stop and pick me up a bag of those Vidalia onions and bring them back to me. In the 80s, they realized what they had. They got together, they started marketing it. Almost overnight, chefs discovered them. And they became a big, big deal. And they're far and away the most popular onion in the whole onion category at the supermarket. But it almost didn't happen. It almost didn't happen. Now, even the same way that you can't just plant a seed in the ground anywhere and be guaranteed you're going to get a crop of any kind, I told you it gets even more specific than that. In Vidalia, 20 counties, parts of 3 others. Georgia counties are very small. The whole Vidalia onion growing region, about a 50-mile radius around the town of Vidalia, Georgia. Anything grown outside of that area is not going to taste like a Vidalia onion. Anybody know why?
Some minerals got to be lacking.
The soil. Not the right soil. It's a very specific soil combination. Part of it is ancient ocean bed. Part of it is all the other things that have washed down to that part of the country over eons from the rest of the country. It makes a very low sulfur soil, leaches out the heat from the onion, and it emphasizes and brings out the sweet. Well, nobody really knew that when the Vidalia onion industry became a big deal. They didn't think the land played that big a role in it. They thought it was just the onion. Still, hey, as long as it's around here, you can plant it and it's going to make. Well, it didn't. So there are very limited types of soil. The one that Vidalia loves more than anything is called Tifton. That's the name of the soil. But the whole 20 county production area is not made of Tifton soil. Just parts of that landmass are Tifton soil. In the meantime, over the years, they built subdivisions, they built schools, they built Walmarts, and they're all on top of prime Vidalia onion land, to the point that about 5 years ago, they looked up and said, aside from what is already planted with Vidalia onions, there's no more Vidalia onion land. Everything else that's suitable, something has been built on. There was one exception, and about 2 years ago, our very good friend and supporter, John Schumann from Schumann Farms, really the Vidalia Onion King. Look for Real Sweet brand in the supermarket. I think it's Sprouts, they carry Mr. Bucks. That's John's other line. Best farmer I know, best businessman I know. And about 2 years ago, on the courthouse steps in Reedsville, Georgia, John Schumann bought the last viable tract of Vidalia onion land. It was 1,600 acres. There is no more. A bidding war ensued. John paid $17 million for that land. So now he's got the capacity. He will be the last person who will be able to expand the Vidalia onion crop. They could grow more, they could sell more, but now they can't because there's Walmarts sitting on top of onion land. That's a very specific example in Vidalia. It's happening all across the nation. The reason that matters, people do have this mindset, we can farm anywhere, and if we can't farm right here, there's something better we can do with this land, like make more money. We should do that and not worry about the agricultural aspect. In many cases, there's a prevailing thought of, shouldn't we just really ship that overseas? Can't they do it cheaper and better and just ship it to us? And even now, right now, 1/3 of the vegetables you eat and 2/3 of the fruit that you eat are imported from other countries. Mexico's a huge player. Central America is a huge player. The Caribbean islands are huge players. Look, I'm very much a globalist. I certainly understand global economics and the need for that, and the opportunity that's there. But I also understand it's really very, very important for a nation that's capable of feeding itself to maintain the capacity to feed itself. Most of you in this room are not old enough to remember when the U.S. was heavily, heavily dependent on foreign oil. In the 70s, especially, the rest of the world looked around and said, they don't have any oil and they've given up production of it. We've got all the oil. We control the pipelines. We now control them. They could raise the price. They did. It was turmoil. It was chaos in the 70s. There were gas lines that would stretch for miles down the streets. You could only buy gas on even or odd days, depending on your license tag. Price went through the roof. And anytime they wanted to make us do something they wanted us to do, all they had to do was threaten to turn off the oil. So smarter minds prevailed. We found other ways. We're no longer that reliant on foreign oil. What if we lose the capacity as a nation to feed ourselves? What then? What if some other country or countries are able to say, do what we want, or we're going to stop the food? And now you don't know how to grow it anymore. You let all your prime land go for development. What are you going to do? What will we do? What will we do? So we believe very strongly, again, globalism, go for it. It's a fantastic thing. It enhances economies. It builds friendships. It builds multinational alliances. It makes the world a better place. At the same time, we've got to be aware to not let what we have get away. Doing that, there's opportunities there. When we look across this 5-layer sustainability spectrum for agriculture, there's opportunity, career opportunity in all of these areas. And a great many of them have absolutely nothing to do with farming or with agriculture. It can be technology, it can be computers, it can be robotics, it can be blockchain. All of it touches. And it's going to become increasingly important. So that's the first thing that must be made sustainable is the land. That's the first thing that you must have to farm.
You have a comment online.
Yeah, sure. What do we got?
Kimberly was saying that she heard China owns 30% of our farms.
Not quite, but Kimberly, it's been a significant problem. Foreign investment in U.S. agricultural land was happening very stealthily for a great many years. People just weren't paying attention to it. If you look up now, and it's in the last few years, there have been some checks and balances starting to be applied. But before we looked up and realized, hey, wait a minute, China's buying all the farmland in the U.S. China controls 6% of all agricultural land in the U.S. Now, a lot of states, I think it's 33 at the last count, have now put rules on the books that Chinese interests and other certain foreign interests, especially those who we categorize as bad actors, cannot buy U.S. farmland. They cannot buy land close to military bases. So hopefully we're getting a handle on that, and we're gonna stop it. But there is a specific chunk. I have seen figures that suggest as much as 30. The figure that I trust from USDA says 6% of U.S. farmland is owned by China.
Can I ask a question about if the foreign investors see the value of this land and are willing to put money into keeping it farmland, and U.S. investors don't, and they're putting their investment money into transforming it into shopping malls and what have you, subdivisions, is there a way to play the one against the other effectively so that we can reignite our own interest in our own land? Because I think we've been giving away the farm literally.
Sure there is, but will we?
And then in which case,
Will we?
is it effective
That's the
to block
question.
foreign investment supposedly to hang on to our assets when it's allowing bad actors here to transform that land permanently?
And that's going to get into a cooperative case. It's going to get into a case. Number one, people have to care. People have to notice in the first place. People have to understand these issues and understand what exists and understand what's at stake. And if we can do that, yeah, I don't see any reason that international cooperation should be problematic. Again, I'm very much a globalist. I just want to make sure that the country I live in, if it all goes kind of hairy, remember what, 3, 4 years ago? Remember that time we all almost died, you know? That got really weird. Things like that happen. We don't like to think about that. What if there are changes in world events and all of a sudden we need to be able to feed ourselves? We need to not have to rely on foreign imports for our food chain. It's funny, it's the supply chain is something that people in agriculture and in the food world have always talked about forever. But nobody else knew what it was until the pandemic. We all looked up and said, what do you mean there's no toilet paper at the grocery store? What do you mean there's no cereal? What do you mean there's no bread? How does that happen? So, yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Look, more minds working on a problem is better. It's always better. But you got to make sure, again, that those interests, I would very much welcome continued foreign investment in U.S. agricultural land with the proviso that there not be any kind of loopholes that somehow let it not be used for agricultural purposes. So that's the land, the practices by which we grow food have changed dramatically, and they're constantly evolutionary. The ways that we maintain a safe food supply. There's a lot of talk, and rightfully so, about the chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, fumigants, all the things that are used in agriculture. That's not a wrong conversation. Believe me, the industry is aware of it. Farmers don't want to use chemicals because they cost money. No company is giving away this stuff for free. This is all part of the bottom line. So not only would they rather not use it on their land, they'd rather not have to pay for it. The reality is, with 1.5% of the population feeding an ever expanding global population, it's very difficult right now to apply pure organic methods and create the kind of volume that we need. This is something that the industry is aware of, though, and there are really smart people, and we talk to them all the time, who are working on it. And I promise you, there is no back room anywhere where there's a bunch of old men in dark suits going, we're going to get them now. And farmers never think that way. They're the best stewards that there is. So as we look at this, how do we make it better? Well, there have been chemicals. There's a long list. Google it sometime. Agricultural chemicals that have been banned. Probably the most famous and the most notorious was DDT. They found had penetrated so deeply into everything that by the late 1960s, it was even in mother's milk. That discovery was really kind of the flashpoint of the modern American ecological movement. When we discovered that, there was a book
Silent Spring.
called Silent Spring. And it was the first time anybody had ever heard of any of this stuff. Even though it was there all along, the research was there all along, and it made sense all along. Silent Spring was the first time anybody heard. Within just a few years after that book was published, DDT had been banned. Not because it didn't work. It was very effective in the field. Man, it helped you farm like crazy. Turned out it was poison, though, and it wasn't good for you, and it was getting into everything. So we look at a whole list of things like this. And again, you got to have this understanding. Farmers don't want to use that. Right now, it's a beautiful thought to think if everybody just planted a garden, everything would be fine. Well, I'm from an era where everybody still planted gardens. And there were a lot of times it wasn't fine. It's hard to grow food. It's very, very difficult to grow food. If you've ever tried to so much as grow a pot of tomatoes out behind your house or on your patio. And if you haven't, I suggest you do it. It's a very eye-opening experience to look around and go, well, that wasn't easy at all. But we've all got this idea in our head. You just sprinkle some seeds. You come along, you water them every now and again. You sit on the porch and have a cool drink and watch them grow. Then you come pick it up. Job done. It's not like that. It's very, very difficult. So nobody wants to use these chemical agents. We have to. They're trying to make better ones every day. The ancient Romans for pesticides liked to use powdered arsenic and powdered lead. So we've come a long way since then. And there are really smart people at institutions like this who are looking for better solutions every day. And it's very, very encouraging as I get to travel the United States and talk to these people and look at the work that they're doing. So we've got to always constantly monitor the practices. So the practices of using harmful chemicals, that's not sustainable. We know now that we can't do that. So we look for the next less harmful chemical with the idea eventually of not needing them at all, hopefully. Do I believe there's ways to do that? Yeah, really, I do. We met some fantastic farmers down in Southwest Florida a couple of 3 months ago. I very lovingly call them eco hippie farmers. And these are people, younger people from all over the world who stay in touch, and they get together and talk about their different farming interests. There were people from New Zealand, there were people from Brazil, there were people from France. They had all gathered in Southwest Florida at these couple of farms we were visiting. They're growing crops like black beans and black-eyed peas with no irrigation, only with natural rainfall, no chemical inputs. They're going back to ancient ways. They're going back to traditional tropical agriculture. What they're doing, they'll plant a coconut palm. Under the coconut palm, there might be a banana tree, which is not as tall. Under that, there might be some kind of bush that produces food that's not as tall as that. And under that, there might be a ground crop, like a cassava or something like that. They cover all that with a mulch. No water is necessary. Whatever dewfall is produced goes from the palm fronds down to the banana fronds, down to the bush, down to the ground, into the mulch, and it stays. So I wouldn't have believed it was possible, except I was actually sitting there shelling black beans with them that they had just grown without water. So we're going to continue to see innovation like that. But right now, those kind of things are such a small scale that they don't really move the needle when it comes to feeding a rapidly expanding world population. There are some predictions that say the number of people that farmers are going to have to feed by the 2050s is going to double. I think that's a little extreme, but that's a number you hear a lot in the industry. We have to prepare in the next 25 years to feed twice as many people as we are now. So it's going to take a lot of science, a lot of technology, and a lot of breakthroughs. And a lot of those are going to come with AI. A lot of those are going to come with technology. A lot of those are going to come with automation. Because there are other problems when it comes to the practices. Water. Water is an absolute must for agriculture. We think of California as a place of utter bounty and abundance, and it really is. It's just, it's gorgeous if you've ever been to the farms of California. Absolutely gorgeous. But before we got to California, California was a desert. What we did is we were able to control snow melt from the mountains and the water from the Colorado River. That created enough irrigation to turn California into the Garden of Eden. But guess what? If those water supplies dry up, which they're starting to do, the world's getting warmer, there's less snow melt in the California mountains. There's less water in the Colorado River. There's a lot of battleground things that are forming out there. Homeowners in Southern California want to be able to water their yards. They want to be able to take showers. They want to be able to swim in their pools. So there's a lot of dispute and a lot of debate in California now. So water is a huge issue. It's fascinating though. Once again, technology rides in to the rescue for agriculture. We got in these fields. You may, if you ever pass agricultural fields, you might see these big watering machines crawling across the fields. They're called rainbirds, and they shoot out beautiful rainbows of water, and it waters the crop like it's raining. Now, most of those are not powered by public water supplies. They're being pumped out of a pond or a well or something like that, but it's still a very inefficient use of water. Now, if you drive by a citrus grove or a strawberry field, you don't see that. In fact, you don't see anything but pretty little rows and well manicured fields. What you don't see is just below the surface of the ground, there are lines, there are plastic lines that are run. At every plant, there's a small nozzle. There are monitors there. Yeah, there you go, drip irrigation. There are computers monitoring that. They're going, instead of just putting a bunch of water on all the crops, why don't we ask each plant what it needs? And the computer systems are built and designed and written to the point, all right, those plants in the back 40 acres, they need a little drink, and they'll get a couple of drops of water, a couple of drops of nutrition. They're always finding ways to do more with less. And in breeding, in research, we're seeing researchers who are designing and developing and breeding crops that use less water. So that's another practice area that's changing. It's changing to be made more sustainable. The next, and probably the biggest challenge that's facing, especially U.S. agriculture, is labor. People don't understand how hard it is to get people to come work on the farm. To be a boss of a farm is one thing. That's a really good job. To be a laborer on a farm is not a really good job. It is hot, it is sweaty, it is breaking. It does not pay well. It does not have benefits. Americans have shown they simply are not going to do those jobs when they can make about the same money working at a fast food restaurant, Walmart, or something like that. So we have in the United States an astonishing migrant labor population. There are a lot of people. It's a program called H-2A visa. That is, farmers can apply to bring in labor from another country to come in and plant and harvest the crop. The bigger farms rely very much on H-2A. It's very cumbersome. It's very difficult. They have to advertise the jobs locally first. And if any Americans show up and want the jobs, they have to be given those jobs, but they don't show up. And the other thing that we have, and it's one of agriculture's worst kept secrets, but one of its biggest secrets, there's an illegal immigrant workforce in this United States that we rely on. And if we did not have these people in this country doing this work, we would not be getting fed. If we were, that clamshell of strawberries that cost you $3 now would probably cost you $15 if you had to pay market rates for that. So I'm not arguing that any of this is good or bad. Look, as difficult as this system is, it beats what we had 160 years ago when the people who were doing this labor were not there voluntarily. And I will tell you, as we travel, we don't see, it's hard for me to find blame with agriculture. It's hard for me to point a finger and go, you treat your workers really crappy, when I look at every other American industry and see the same thing. You know, so it's not good. I'm against it, but everybody's doing it. So I'm not going to pick on farming for that. When Walmart's solution to helping its employees have better lives, I don't know if you've heard this, instead of paying them more money, they're teaching them how to apply for social benefits while they're working at Walmart. I don't think that's much of a solution. I don't think that's much of a solution. So this migrant workforce, actually there's West Coast workforce and a East Coast workforce. They're headquartered in Florida. They winter in Florida. And they move with the crop. What you may not think about is all the things that we grow here in Florida, all the vegetables, all the fruit, the blueberries that start here in say mid-March to April. Blueberry season starts here, goes about 6 weeks. Well, you don't go to the supermarket after that and there's no more blueberries because by then they're coming off the crop's coming in Georgia. After Georgia, it's going to be the Carolinas. After the Carolinas, it's just going to march on up the coast into Michigan and Maine where it wraps up and starts over again. What you don't know is this illegal immigrant workforce follows the crop and does that work. And they go from farm to farm as units, as a unified labor force to do this job and to do this work that Americans have proven they just won't do. Then it wraps up and then they come back to Florida where they start all over again because we can grow food in the winter here. Now, it sounds extreme and it sounds dramatic to say things like that. And if you're outside of agriculture, you're probably like, that's not right. They're just exploiting people. No, Americans really won't do the work. You might remember a few years ago when Arizona implemented the stop and check. No, they could stop anybody and demand to see citizenship papers. If you didn't have yours and you didn't have your proof of citizenship, they could pick you up, carry you off, and do whatever they needed to do from there. Well, Georgia, that same year, the Georgia legislature that spring said, we're going to do the same thing and we're going to enact this law as soon as possible. That year, the entire migrant workforce that was based in Florida just sat Georgia out. They were afraid to go to Georgia because they were afraid they'd be arrested and deported. So they waited until Georgia season was done and the Carolinas started, and they just went through Alabama around and they picked up right where they left off. In the meantime, Georgia crops were rotting in the field because there was no one to pick them. The situation became so dire. Then Governor Nathan Deal offered any nonviolent parolee in the state complete absolution if they take a job on a farm. All you had to do was take a job on a farm, you're off parole. If your fines aren't paid yet, your fines are gone. You never have to see another parole officer. You're not in trouble anymore. All you got to do is work on a farm. Well, thousands showed up the first day. I've talked to so many farmers who were involved in that and took advantage of that labor force. And they say it was just, if you ever get a chance to see people work on a farm, do. And you can watch our show and see it. There's no messing around. There's no wasting around. These people are moving. A lot of times they're getting paid by how much they pick, maybe by the piece for watermelons or by the basket for peaches or something like that. So they're not wasting time. They're moving expediently. But this reformed prison workforce that showed up to go to work in the Georgia fields, they just wander off and make a call on their cell phone or have a smoke or whatever. And that first day when they went to lunch, half of them didn't come back after lunch. By the end of the week, there were none. And $500 million of Georgia crops rotted in the field that spring. So labor is a situation. And again, you've got that dichotomy between ownership and labor. Well, that's unfortunately looks like it's just part of the world. I'd love to think we can change that. I don't know, but I don't know how that happens. Yeah.
Did they reverse that in Georgia after?
Yeah, very much so.
I didn't realize that before they enacted it.
I don't think they believed it. And I think they actually believed at that point, if we do this, Americans will come take these jobs. And then when Americans did not come take those jobs, they said, well, maybe people on parole will come take. No, we would rather keep paying our fines and stay on parole than work on a farm.
Our students here and many students throughout the state of Florida every year go up to Tallahassee with a group called Gen Cleo. And this last spring, we went up and lobbied against the lack of protections for workers and farms from heat protection.
Yes,
We lost, and the governor signed something where there's no obligation. You can't, in fact, you cannot provide heat protections. How, if we did provide heat protections, how might that affect labor? Does it? Are
no
we-
more
are we doing
Americans
it-
are coming, they're not coming out because they can't have breaks and they're not coming out because, look, I grew up doing farm work. And it was hard. I packed peaches and I sprayed sugar cane and I cut sugar cane and I baled hay and I cut hay and I took care of cows. And I did all of it. And by the time I was 18, I knew the only thing I wanted out of life was to get the hell away from the farm as quickly as possible and go as far as possible. I want to go to the city and tell my stories, but even if I didn't, I wouldn't have stayed in the country and worked on farms. And I think generation by generation, we like to think of America as upwardly mobile and aspirational. I know there's a lot of question right now with the millennials and the generations coming along. Have we actually done that? No, I think we've lost some progress there, but not to the point. There's no parent that ever raised a child and said, I hope you grow up to pick peaches. It's just not. It's just a,
My question is there a perverse logic? So there's no men in a little back room going, but is there a perverse logic where there are people saying, hey, if we put in the stipulations that workers have to be protected on these farms, then not only will we not have legal Americans and legal immigrants working, we won't have anybody. In other words, enforcing a kind of slavery is part of the economic game to keep our produce low.
yeah.
And so if we go to full sustainability and environmental justice, then we have to accept prices are going to rise.
I believe that's right. And the question is, where do we do that and who pays for it? Does the farmer pay for it? They're not going to. You'll wind up paying for it because they'll pass it on. They'll charge the retail store more or the wholesaler more. Well, they're not going to pay for it. So it's all just going to come to you. So that's the question that we as a society are going to have to answer. Are we willing to pay more? But I think there's a better answer. I think it's a better answer that's going to obviate all of this. As I said earlier, 160 years ago, if you were working on a farm, it probably wasn't optional. You did not want to be there. Fortunately, we certainly see the caste system at work here, but the way that farm owners and farm laborers are separated and treated is no different than the way Jeff Bezos lives and the average Amazon warehouse worker has things. So, yeah, you can't say this or that, but surely this agricultural system has its vestiges in the very bad old days when people were not there voluntarily. I had a really creepy thing, and that's why it's always still weird to go out. Diversity in farm ownership is a very dicey situation, and this is something that I hope some of the bright minds here in this room and are watching will see as an area of opportunity to get involved. The majority of big farm owners, and understand something, 96% of all U.S. farms, no matter how huge they are, including names you see in the grocery store every day, are still family owned. It might be a really big company, but there's still a single family that owns that. So there is very much that lord and peasant kind of mentality. Most people are more genial about it. Most people are more, well, I take care of my people, they take care of me. But you see some vestiges and some holdovers of that very, very hard time where there's an air of entitlement, and probably the most uncomfortable I've ever been in my life. Big peach producer in South Carolina. My family's been in the business a long time, and in farming long time. And we went to visit, and they invited me to go see their plantation house. This was not their main home where they lived. This was an old antebellum plantation out in the middle of their fields. It's completely restored. They used it for a party house. Okay, now what was crazy, I went to that house and walked around, it was just very foreboding. And it felt bad, just felt bad. So I slipped away from everybody else and I went up to the second floor. And I went and stood on the balcony. I looked out and roads were dirt. Any road you could see was dirt. You couldn't see any power lines. You couldn't see any lights. There were no light poles. All you saw were fields, 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 and hundreds of brown faces doing work. And I'm standing on the balcony of this old plantation house going, some people haven't changed. Some people haven't changed. That's what's going to have to change ultimately. But that's across all industry. It's not just farming. It's just very visible. We've got a very tangible link to the past there that's pretty immoral and pretty horrible. But you see very, very little of that. I left that farm that day and I vowed to never go back. And we haven't and we won't. Mostly you see people who do care. They've still got that, oh, my little workers, mindset, the pat on the head. But that's industry. That's haves and have-nots, and that's everywhere. So, but what the real answer is going to be here is what we're seeing across the nation as we travel. It's incredibly exciting. And this is a huge area of opportunity for anybody who's interested in working in sustainability in non-farming ways, automation and robotics. We're already seeing almost all of the grain crops, all of the wheat. It's all robotic combines. They're run by GPS. They go and just wipe out the field. It's much harder when you get into fruit and vegetables because some of these things require a delicate touch. They've been trying, I've been watching for 12 years as a genius in Plant City. In fact, his lead engineer is the guy who started BattleBots.
Yeah.
They're making a robotic strawberry. And this thing can already crawl across 8 rows at a time, can run 24 hours a day. Ultimately, the solution for labor in agriculture is going to be automation and robotics, and it's on the way fast. So this is a situation that will resolve itself. We got to be patient. We can be nicer in the meantime while we do it. We forget that even by the time the Civil War was fought, within 20 years after that, the cotton gin and the combine were invented. And overnight, the amount of labor needed for cotton went from vast to next to nothing, just because of technology, So that was an immoral system. It was propped up and supported by people who had a tendency to do what humans do, which is look the other way. You see something we don't like, we look the other way. So we're going to have to start speaking up. We're going to have to start saying things like this. I feel that the decisions that Governor DeSantis made to deny those workers rights to even water breaks in the summer working in fields in Florida, I find it unconscionable. I don't know how you can make that argument. I don't see any line of logic that comes up with that answer. No, you can't have water breaks. No, you cannot have mandatory water breaks. So, but I think ultimately that's where the labor situation is going to go. Automation and technology. So that's practices. Now crop. Oh my gosh.
And someone in the chat wanted to wrap us up by asking, is there hope?
I'll come back to the banana. Oh, we had so much more good stuff. So
We'll have to watch a show.
The banana. What's going on with these bananas, y'all? What's going to happen with the banana? Banana's dead. It's got less than 10 years. There'll be no more bananas. We found out about a company in Raleigh, North Carolina called LO Life. They're partnered up with Dole. Even though this is a banana we eat, as you mentioned earlier, there's other bananas. Some of them are full of big hard seeds and some of them just don't taste good. Some of them are great, but they won't withstand being picked in Central America, shipped to the US, sent to the supermarket and get to your house. They just won't last that long. But all of these different varieties have different characteristics and different strengths. Some of them taste better. Some of them last longer. Some of them are more disease resistant. What they were able to do is through genetic engineering, not genetic modification. Genetic modification at GMO is when you force a mutation. Genetic engineering is just like traditional crossbreeding, where you take this plant and try to make a better version. The strawberry you're eating today is not the strawberry you were eating 5 years ago, is not the strawberry you were eating 5 years before that. Because they're constantly breeding new varieties with traditional ways to make better strawberries. So it's the exact same thing with the banana, except they don't have time to go through the traditional crossbreeding takes many years, 10, 12, 15 years, and then you hope you're on the right track. So now they have the genome, they can look at all these other banana varieties. They can go, oh, these are the genes that make it taste better. These are the genes that make it smell better. These are the genes that make it last longer. And these are the genes that make it resistant to Fusarium fungus. So in a lab in Raleigh, North Carolina, I first found out about this banana story 12 years ago. And I've been wanting to tell it ever since, but I hoped it would have a happy ending when I finally got to tell it. And I never dreamed I'd be telling it in Raleigh, North Carolina. But I stood in the greenhouse in Raleigh and I looked at banana trees that had grown from genetic engineering, where they took the strengths of the other bananas, sliced them into our good old yummy friend, the Cavendish, and they have created a plant that resists Fusarium. Even now, they are growing up these trees in the greenhouse as fast as they can, shipping them to Central America to establish the test plot that looks like going to save your banana. So sustainability across the board, there's so many opportunities. And the more you look, the more you'll find. I could have gone on. That's why I should have looked at my clock more. I could have sped some of this up. There's a whole lot. And anybody wants to reach out to me, feel free. Find us, contact us. We love to hear from people. I will, yeah.
Can I offer that when you guys come up to visit Rosebud?
Yeah.
A lot of our students were just up there last week, but that we invite them to be a part of that.
Sure, that'd be awesome.
Hear it again through your eyes.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be fantastic.
Nice to meet with you.
The other thing I'll tell you, the thing I'll leave you with, up until now, Where the Food Comes From, we're about to launch season 5 of Where the Food Comes From, 65 episodes. It's only been available on one US TV network. It's on cable and direct TV, so literally nobody under 40 even know it exists. We are working now, and I'm proud to announce, as of today, publicly for the first time, you can now go home and watch every episode of Where the Food Comes From on YouTube. And I hope you will. At Where the Food Comes From, we're real easy to find.
It's an assignment.
Including the banana episode.
Including the story of the amazing banana. That's the first, it's the 3rd episode of season 5, but because I was talking to everybody today, we went ahead and put it up live too. So I hope y'all will go look at that. I hope I'll get to hear from you. Thanks for coming out. Thanks all y'all. And I hope I'll get to do this again sometime. There's so much more to tell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.